Podcast 3, The Terms of the Treaty of Versailles of June 1919. There were two podcasts on this. The second podcast will talk you through the reasons why the Germans resented the terms so much, but this first podcast here will just really sort of take you through, make sure you understand what the key terms were. A little bit of background about it. Remember, the war ended on the 11th of November 1918. It wasn't until the 28th of June 1919, so 7 months later, that the peace treaty was presented to the Germans, and the Germans were forced to sign that peace treaty. Versailles is a suburb of Paris, capital of France. So the victors, the winners of World War I, the French, the British, and the Americans, based themselves in Paris, and the reason it took 7 months to draw up the treaty, well, that tells you a lot. They couldn't reach agreement about how to treat Germany. The Americans, on one extreme, wanted a very, very fair treaty. They really believed the most important thing about the treaty was not punishing the loser, but it was about preventing a war happening in the future. On the other extreme, the French had a much harder position. They wanted to punish Germany. From their point of view, Germany had attacked France and had occupied France for 4 years, or occupied much of France for 4 years, had caused a lot of damage to French farmland and towns and villages, and they felt that Germany needed to effectively pay to repair the damage. Britain was somewhere in the middle. She wanted a reasonably harsh treaty, but at the same time she didn't want it to be too harsh. Okay. Germany wasn't invited to those talks. When she was invited in June and given the piece of paper, which had a long list of nearly 400 points, she was simply told, you have to sign. That pretty much tells you, of the three, the French, the British and the Americans, who basically dominated. It was the French who won through. So it was a dictated peace. It was often called a diktat, the German word for dictated, a diktat. The Germans had no say in that, and effectively they were told they have to sign, and if they didn't sign, then the war would start again. And remember, Germany was in retreat, and the war ended before any foreign soldiers set foot on German soil. So Germany had no choice but to sign. She felt it was almost like a gun was being put to her head. There's the bitter pill, the difficult medicine that Germany has now got to swallow, a cartoon that was drawn at the time that represents the sort of views of the Germans. Lots and lots of articles in the Treaty of Versailles, each of which punished Germany, but the glue that held it all together was Article 231, because it was that basically said Germany was guilty for causing the war in the first place. Okay, so all the other clauses, hundreds of them, punished Germany. You can't punish unless you have guilt, but the Germans felt that they did not cause the war in the first place. They felt that they were no more responsible than any other country. So that, more than anything else, over the next 14 years, upset the Germans. So you can group the terms of the Treaty of Versailles into various headings. One heading is reparations. Germany had to pay. It was eventually worked out at £6,600 million to the Allies. Most of it went to France and Belgium, where the countries that had been most damaged by Germany occupying their territory at the start of the war. In 1919, when the Germans signed the Treaty of Versailles, that amount wasn't actually worked out. It wasn't actually worked out until 1921. So effectively, it was a bit like Germany had to basically sign a blank cheque. She'd been led to believe in 1919, when the Treaty of Versailles was signed, that she would have to pay something, but she didn't expect anything near as much as that. The second heading is military restrictions. So Germany was weakened. She had, after all, attacked France in 1914, so the French were absolutely determined that wouldn't happen again. So she wasn't allowed to have an air force. Her navy was seriously weakened, no submarines, and only 6 battleships. and only 15,000 sailors. The army was restricted to 100,000 men, which was very, very small. For example, at that time, the French army was 700,000 men. So basically meant that Germany was really now much weaker than France, which effectively meant that France could attack Germany, and Germany would not be able to resist. And then also the border region between Germany and France, called the Rhineland, Germany was not allowed to keep any troops in the border region, and in fact the Allies, the British and the French, were allowed to put their own soldiers into the Rhineland. Now the Rhineland wasn't taken away from Germany, but it was what we call demilitarized. She wasn't allowed to keep any troops there. Again, that was part of the French protecting themselves, because they felt that because Germany had attacked France in 1914, they didn't want that happening again, so troops were not allowed near the frontier with France. And then the final heading, of course, is land losses. Okay, so some territory was lost. Germany did lose territory. Now, the one that most students automatically remember is Alsace-Lorraine, which, if we zoom in, was this region here in black. That was actually taken from Germany and given to France. In actual fact, that was probably one land loss that did not really upset the Germans too much. It was actually French. Germany had taken it from France in 1871. It was mainly populated by French people, and most Germans didn't really complain about that. What they did complain was about the territorial losses to the east. Now, a new country called Poland was created. Poland is this area here, and as you can see, the bit in black physically split Germany into two. Now that piece of territory, you're looking at it there, it's shaded in black. As you can see, physically split Germany into two. So Germany is green, and the separated bit of Germany, which I'll just circle there in blue, that bit there, was physically split by that piece of black land that was given to the new country of Poland. Now, the argument was that territory that was given to Poland was populated by Polish people. Actually, there were many Polish people living in that piece of land, but there were also many Germans as well. So Germany felt that they had been hard done by there, and that piece of territory was called the Polish Corridor. Now, 20 years later, when Hitler was the leader of Germany, World War I started because Germany attacked the Polish corridor to get that piece of territory back. So that kind of gives you an idea about how much it really did rankle. It really upset most Germans, the fact they had lost that territory. Have a look at that map again, and you can see there were other regions shaded in black. They were also territorial losses. So, for example, in the north there, just circled that in blue, that was called Schleswig. North Schleswig was lost to Denmark. Actually, as you can see there, the people were allowed to vote on that one. So it was reasonably fair that the people of the area were given a vote. Which country do you want to belong to, Germany or Denmark? Another area down here, I've just circled it, Eupen and Malmedy, that was given to Belgium. And then looking over to the east, there's an area called Silesia, and again the details is there. Again, part of that went to Poland, but part of it stayed with Germany. So again, the people were given a vote. So some of the decisions were not dictated. The people living in those regions could vote which country they wanted to belong to. So there was a degree of fairness there. So it's a useful map that. It shows you the main territorial changes. It's got other useful information. In the middle there, it tells you about what proportion of iron and coal and the damage to their industry. And as you can see, the demilitarised Rhineland, it's shaded in green. That was not taken from Germany, but Germany was not allowed to keep troops in that area. Okay, and there's another map that represents it. Again, it's just scanned from a different textbook, but looking at the same information from two different points of view helps you understand it. So those are the key terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The next podcast will take you through the reasons why Germany resented the Treaty of Versailles so much. Thank you.